There's something that crosses centuries, something that challenged popes, emperors, scientists, and philosophers, something that Stephen Hawking, the man who unraveled black holes, who saw time bend before gravity, who touched the limits of the universe with the fingertips of his mind, considered inevitable. And that something has a name that was excommunicated, banned, erased from official history for 300 years, Baruch Spinoza, a Dutch Jew from the 17th century, who dared to say something so dangerous, so absolute, so devastating to all the world's religions, that even today few have the courage to repeat it out loud. He said that God is not who you think he is. He said that God did not create the world because God is the world. He said there is no heaven, no hell, no final judgment, no free will. He said that everything, absolutely everything, is part of a single, infinite, eternal, necessary substance. And Stephen Hawking agreed with him. But why? Why would one of the greatest scientists in modern history look back, cross 3 centuries of technological progress, ignore Newton, Einstein, Bohr, and point to an excommunicated philosopher, forgotten, buried in silence in an unmarked grave? Because Spinoza saw something that science took 300 years to begin to see, and what he saw can change everything you believe about God, about yourself, about the meaning of your own life. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Because this is not just any story. This is the story of how one man destroyed God and rebuilt him from scratch. Amsterdam, 1656. The Portuguese synagogue is packed. The air is dense, heavy with incense and tension. Long-bearded men in their finest clothes fill the dark wooden benches. Women watch from the upper gallery in silence. Everyone knows what is about to happen. In the center of the hall, a 23-year-old man stands. Baruch Spinoza. Dark eyes deep, calm. He doesn't seem nervous, he doesn't seem regretful. He simply watches the rabbis who are about to pronounce the most severe sentence the Jewish community can impose, the cherem, total excommunication. The eldest rabbi stands. His voice echoes through the stone walls like thunder. By the judgment of the angels and the saints, we excommunicate, expel, curse, and condemn Baruch Spinoza. Let him be cursed by day and cursed by night. Cursed when he lies down and cursed when he rises. Cursed when he goes out and cursed when he comes in. May the Lord not forgive him. May the wrath and fury of the Lord be kindled against this man and bring upon him all the curses written in the book of the law. Absolute silence. We order that no one maintain communication with him, neither in writing nor by word, that no one do him any favor, that no one remain under the same roof with him, that no one approach within 4 cubits of his person, that no one read anything written or composed by him. Spinoza doesn't look away. He knew this was going to happen. He had chances to recant. They offered him money to stay silent. They offered him a respectable position in the community. They offered everything, but he refused, because Baruch Spinoza had seen something that could not be unsaid, something that would change the world forever. When the ceremony ends, he walks to the synagogue door. The floor creaks beneath his feet. No one looks at him. No one says goodbye. He crosses the threshold and walks out into the cold Amsterdam street, and never returns. But what exactly did he say? What did he do that was so terrible? He was born in 1632 into a family of Portuguese Jews who had fled the Inquisition. His father was a respected merchant, an influential member of Amsterdam's Sephardic community. Baruch grew up studying the Torah, the Talmud, the Kabbalah. He was brilliant, a prodigy. Everyone expected him to become a great rabbi, but something happened. As a teenager, Spinoza began reading other books, Descartes, Hobbes, Maimonides, and the more he read, the more questions arose. Questions the community didn't want to hear. Why does God need to be worshipped? If God is perfect and infinite, why would he care about our prayers? Why would he demand sacrifices? Why would he punish those who don't follow rules written thousands of years ago? And the most dangerous question of all, how do we know the Bible was actually written by God? The rabbis tried to bring him back. They talked, they argued, they threatened, but Spinoza couldn't stop thinking. And then came the incident that sealed his fate. One night, as Spinoza was leaving the synagogue, a man approached him, a religious fanatic who had heard rumors about the young philosopher's heretical ideas. The man drew a knife and tried to stab him. Spinoza barely escaped. The blade tore his coat, but didn't reach flesh. He kept that coat for the rest of his life as a reminder, but this didn't stop him. If anything, it only strengthened his determination, because Spinoza had reached a devastating conclusion, a conclusion he knew would destroy his life, his reputation, his future. But a conclusion he believed to be absolutely true. God is not a person. God is not a king sitting on a throne in heaven. God doesn't get angry, doesn't repent, doesn't choose a favorite people, doesn't intervene in the world. So what is God? God is the very substance of reality. God is nature. God is everything that exists. There is no separation between creator and creation. There is only one infinite, eternal, necessary reality. And we humans are not creatures separate from God. We are modes of God. We are temporary expressions of divine substance. When we are born, we don't arrive from somewhere external to existence. And when we die, we don't go anywhere. We simply return to the infinite substance of which we have always been part. There is no heaven, no hell, no eternal reward, no eternal punishment. Can you imagine the scandal? For the Jews, Spinoza was denying the God of Abraham. For Christians, he was denying Jesus and salvation. For Muslims, he was denying Allah. He was saying that all religions were fundamentally wrong about the nature of God, and he wasn't just speculating, he was demonstrating, using geometry, using pure logic. Building a philosophical system as rigorous as Euclid, but instead of proving theorems about triangles, he was proving theorems about God. After the excommunication, Spinoza left Amsterdam. He moved to a small village called Rijnsburg, where he rented a modest room. To support himself, he worked as a lens grinder. He spent his days bent over glass, shaping perfect surfaces for telescopes. At night, he wrote, he began working on a work called Ethics, a book that would take years to complete, a book he knew could not be published during his lifetime, a book so dangerous that his closest friends would beg him not to publish it. But before Ethics, he wrote another book, smaller, more direct, more provocative, a book that directly attacked the authority of the Bible, the theological political treatise. In this book, Spinoza treated the Bible not as sacred word, but as a historical text written by fallible humans. He analyzed contradictions, inconsistencies, impossibilities. Moses could not have written the first 5 books of the Bible because those books describe Moses' death. The miracles were not evidence of divine intervention, but exaggerations or misunderstood natural phenomena. The prophets were not messengers of God, but people with vivid imagination. And the most explosive conclusion, religion was not created by God. It was created by rulers who realized that fear and hope are powerful tools of social control. When the treatise was published anonymously in 1670, it caused an earthquake. The book was immediately banned. Copies were burned. But it was too late. The book was already circulating. Spinoza had opened a door that could never be closed. But why does this matter today? Why would Stephen Hawking, 3 centuries later, look at this excommunicated philosopher and say he was right? Because modern science arrived at conclusions surprisingly similar. Think about quantum mechanics. Think about relativity. What do they have in common? They show us that reality is not as our intuition suggests. There is no absolute separation between observer and observed. There are no sharp divisions between matter and energy. There is only an interconnected reality, where everything affects everything, where each particle is entangled with all others. Spinoza called this substance. Einstein called it unified field. Quantum physicists talk about entanglement. Different words, but pointing to the same vision. There is no fundamental separation between things. And there was one more thing that fascinated Hawking about Spinoza, something deeply personal. Hawking spent most of his life trapped in a body that didn't work. He couldn't walk, couldn't speak without a machine. Most people would see tragedy, would see injustice, but Hawking didn't see it that way. For Spinoza, there is no free will in the traditional sense. Everything that happens is the result of prior causes. You didn't choose to be born, didn't choose your body, didn't choose the circumstances that shaped your personality. But this doesn't mean you are powerless. It means you are part of an infinite causal chain. And when you understand this, something extraordinary happens. You stop rebelling against reality. You stop asking, why me? And in that acceptance, you find peace. Hawking lived this. He didn't lament, didn't victimize himself. When asked how he dealt with his condition, he said something remarkable. "My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus." That is pure Spinozism. Accept what is necessary and find joy through understanding that each circumstance is part of a perfect totality. But there's a paradox here. If everything is determined, if there's no free will, why should we strive to do anything? Why seek knowledge? Why try to improve? Spinoza had an answer for this, and it's an answer that would revolutionize not just philosophy, but how we understand human happiness. He said, "You don't choose whether to act or not. You will act anyway. But there are two types of action. Action that comes from ignorance and action that comes from understanding. When you act from ignorance, you are like a leaf blown by the wind. You react to emotions, to fear, to desire, to anger. You are controlled by external causes you don't understand, and this makes you weak, miserable, always at the mercy of circumstances. But when you act from understanding, something changes. You are still determined. You still don't have free will, but now you understand the causes that move you, and in that understanding, you gain power. It's like the difference between being pushed into the abyss and jumping deliberately. The result may be the same, but the experience is completely different. Spinoza called this freedom, not the freedom to choose anything, but the freedom to act according to your own nature, understanding the causes that determine you. And this freedom brings something precious, joy. For Spinoza, joy doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from increasing your power to act. It comes from understanding more, from being more conscious, from moving from passivity to activity. Every time you understand something new, you become more free. Every time you understand the causes of your emotions, you gain power over them, not to eliminate them, but to not be enslaved by them. And the most powerful knowledge of all, knowing yourself as part of infinite substance, knowing your own eternity, not in the sense that you will live forever, but in the sense that you have always been part of something that has no beginning or end. Now stop for a moment. Take a deep breath. If you've come this far, it's because something in this story has touched you. Perhaps you're wondering, can this really be true? Is God really not a person? Was the Bible really written by humans? Does life really have no purpose beyond what we ourselves create? Write in the comments now. What do you find hardest to accept in Spinoza's philosophy? What challenges you most? Because this isn't a journey you take alone. There are thousands of people watching this now, asking the same questions. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand not just what Spinoza said, but how this can change your life today, subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will show how Spinoza's most radical ideas were confirmed by modern science in ways no one could have predicted. Let's continue. In 1673, something extraordinary happened. Spinoza received a letter, an official letter, a job offer as professor of philosophy at the University of Heidelberg, one of the most prestigious in Europe. The letter said he would have complete freedom of thought as long as he did not publicly disturb the established religion. Any other philosopher would have accepted immediately. It was financial security. It was prestige. It was a platform for his ideas. But Spinoza refused. Why? Because he knew that not disturbing religion meant censoring his own ideas, meant lying, meant pretending to believe things he knew were false. And for Spinoza, this was worse than poverty, worse than anonymity, worse than death. He responded politely that he preferred his independence, that he preferred to live modestly, grinding lenses, but thinking freely rather than living comfortably but chained. This decision says everything about who Spinoza was. He didn't seek fame, didn't seek power, didn't seek to convert anyone. He sought only one thing, truth. And he was willing to pay any price for it, but truth has a cost. And Spinoza was about to discover how much. In the following years, his health began to deteriorate. The dust from the lenses he ground every day was destroying his lungs. He developed tuberculosis. He coughed blood. He grew weaker each day, but he continued writing, refining ethics, corresponding with the greatest intellectuals of Europe. Gottfried Leibniz traveled especially to meet him. Henry Oldenburg, secretary of the Royal Society of London, exchanged regular letters with him. Spinoza was becoming a legend, the solitary heretic who defied all religions, the philosopher who tried to explain God using mathematics, the man who refused all offers of comfort to maintain his intellectual integrity, and on February 21st, 1677, at 44 years old, Baruch Spinoza died, alone, in a rented room, with only a few friends around him. His belongings, some books, simple clothes, his lenses, and stacks of manuscripts. Among those manuscripts was Ethics, complete, perfect, never published. His friends knew what to do. Months after Spinoza's death, they published Ethics anonymously, and the impact was immediate and devastating. Religious authorities were horrified. Politicians demanded the book be banned. Conservative philosophers attacked it violently. For decades, being called a Spinozist was one of the worst insults someone could receive. But something interesting began to happen. Philosophers began reading Spinoza in secret, and they discovered something surprising. His ideas made sense, made more sense than anything they had read before. In the 18th century, during the Enlightenment, Spinoza became a secret hero of free thinkers. Voltaire admired him, Diderot studied him, Rousseau was influenced by him. But it was in the 19th century that something extraordinary happened. Scientists began to discover that Spinoza wasn't just philosophizing, he was predicting. Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859. And what did he demonstrate? That humans are not special creations of God. We are the result of a natural process. We are part of nature, not separate from it. Exactly what Spinoza had said 200 years before. Sigmund Freud developed psychoanalysis. And what did he discover? That most of our actions are determined by unconscious causes. That we don't have as much control over ourselves as we think. That free will is an illusion. Exactly what Spinoza had said. Albert Einstein revolutionized physics. And when asked about his religious beliefs, he said something remarkable. I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings. Einstein understood what Spinoza was saying. The universe doesn't need a separate creator. The universe is self-sufficient. It is its own cause, it is eternal, it is necessary. And then came quantum mechanics, and general relativity, and modern cosmology, and all of them confirmed profound aspects of Spinoza's vision. Quantum mechanics showed that there is no absolute separation between observer and observed, that everything is interconnected in ways that defy our intuition, that particles that have never touched can be entangled, affecting each other instantly across any distance. This sounds like mysticism, but it's not. It's experimentally proven physics, and it's exactly the kind of radical interconnection that Spinoza described when he said everything is part of a single substance. General relativity showed that space and time are not entities separate from matter and energy. They are aspects of a single reality we call space-time. Matter curves space. Curved space determines how matter moves. There is no separation. There is only one dynamic, interconnected reality, where everything affects everything. And then came Stephen Hawking, and he took all of this even further. Hawking spent decades studying black holes. These objects are so dense, so massive, that not even light can escape them. They are places where the normal laws of physics collapse, where space and time become so distorted that they cease to make sense in the way we're used to. And Hawking discovered something extraordinary. Black holes aren't completely black. They emit radiation. A weak radiation, almost imperceptible but real. This radiation now bears his name, Hawking radiation. But the most fascinating thing isn't the discovery itself. It's what it implies. It means black holes evaporate. Very, very slowly, but they evaporate. It means that even the most permanent objects in the universe are not eternal. Everything changes. Everything transforms. Nothing is separate from the rest. And when Hawking looked at the universe as a whole, he saw something that Spinoza would have recognized immediately. The universe doesn't need a creator. It could have arisen spontaneously from nothing according to the laws of quantum physics. There is no need for a moment of divine creation. No need for an external purpose. The universe simply is. This doesn't mean the universe is meaningless. It means that meaning doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. We are the ones conscious beings, part of the universe. who create meaning through our lives, our choices, our understanding. And here is the profound connection between Hawking and Spinoza. Both rejected the idea of a personal God. Both saw the universe as self-sufficient. Both understood that humans are not the center of everything. Both found beauty not in the illusion of special importance, but in the truth of being part of something infinitely greater. And both lived this philosophy. Spinoza, excommunicated and poor, never complained. Hawking, trapped in a failing body, never victimized himself. Both transformed their limitations into a source of strength through understanding. But there's something more, something few people realize. Spinoza's vision is not nihilistic. It's not depressing. It's liberating. If you truly understand that everything is part of a single infinite substance, several things change. First, you stop fearing death. Why? Because death is not the end of existence. It's just a transformation. The atoms that form your body don't disappear. They return to nature. They become part of other things. The energy that animates you is not lost. It just changes form. You have always been part of the universe, and you always will be. Just not in this specific configuration you call me. Second, you stop feeling separate. You understand that every person you meet is fundamentally made of the same substance as you. When you hurt another, you are hurting a part of the whole of which you are also part. When you help another, you are strengthening the whole. Ethics doesn't come from divine commandments. It comes from understanding that we are all one. Third, you stop seeking happiness in external things. You understand that true joy comes from increasing your power of understanding, from becoming more conscious, from acting according to your deepest nature, not according to superficial desires implanted by external causes. And fourth, you find peace, not the peace of ignorance, the peace of understanding. You see that everything that happens is necessary, not in the sense that it's good, in the sense that it couldn't be different given the causes that preceded it. This doesn't mean you shouldn't try to change things. It means you change things without anger, without resentment, without the illusion that the universe has something against you. You become like a river that flows, doesn't fight against stones, flows around them, or with enough time, wears them down. Hawking understood this perfectly. He had every reason to be bitter, to blame God, to give up. But he did none of that. He accepted his condition as a fact of nature and continued exploring the universe with insatiable curiosity. And when he looked back through the history of philosophy, searching for who had understood this before, he found Spinoza, an excommunicated Jew from the 17th century who never had access to powerful telescopes, who never saw the equations of relativity, who never heard of quantum mechanics, but who, through the pure force of thought, arrived at a vision of the universe that would take 300 years for science to confirm. But don't think that accepting this vision is easy. It's not. It goes against everything we've been taught since childhood. We were taught that we are special, that we were created in God's image, that we have a divine purpose, that our choices really matter in a cosmic sense, that there is final justice, that the good are rewarded and the bad are punished. Spinoza rips all that away, and in its place offers something much more difficult: total responsibility. If there is no God judging you, then you need to judge yourself. If there is no heaven or hell, then this life is all you have. If there is no purpose given from outside, then you need to create your own purpose. This scares most people. It's much more comfortable to believe that someone is in control, that there's a plan, that everything makes sense even if we can't see it. But Spinoza would say, this comfort is a prison. You are trading truth for consolation, and in the long run, only truth can free you. Because when you live based on illusions, you are constantly in conflict with reality. You pray for things that won't come. You blame yourself for thoughts you can't control. You fear punishments that don't exist. You waste your only life preparing for an imaginary future life. But when you live based on truth, something changes. You stop fighting against what is, and you start working with what is. You understand that your thoughts and emotions are results of causes, and that you can change those causes through understanding, not through willpower, but through knowledge. For example, you feel anger toward someone. The religious response would be, control your anger, because God doesn't like anger. Spinoza's response would be, understand why you feel anger. What are the causes? What expectation was violated? What belief was challenged? And when you understand the causes, anger loses power, not because you repressed it, but because you illuminated it with understanding. This works for any emotion: fear, envy, desire, sadness. All of them are results of causes, and all of them can be transformed through understanding those causes. Spinoza called this knowledge of the third kind, the highest type of knowledge, not just knowing facts, not just understanding concepts, but seeing things sub specie aeternitatis, from the perspective of eternity, seeing each thing as a necessary part of an infinite totality, seeing each moment as a unique and unrepeatable expression of divine substance, seeing your own life not as a journey from point A to point B, but as an eternal mode of infinite being. This sounds abstract, almost mystical, but it's not. It's deeply practical. When you see things from the perspective of eternity, your problems don't disappear, but you stop being crushed by them. You see them as waves on the surface of a deep ocean, real but temporary, significant but not absolute. And this gives you extraordinary strength, the strength to continue when everything seems impossible, the strength to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel, the strength to seek truth when the lie would be more comfortable. Hawking had this strength. He faced a devastating disease with grace. He explored the deepest questions of existence with humor. He never lost curiosity, never lost joy, never lost the ability to wonder. And when people asked how he managed, he didn't speak of faith. He didn't speak of hope for some future reward. He spoke of understanding, of seeing things as they are, of accepting reality and finding beauty in it. This is pure Spinozism. But there is one aspect of Spinoza's philosophy that we need to explore more deeply, an aspect that is especially relevant today, the question of freedom. We live in an age obsessed with freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of expression, individual freedom, and that's good. But there is deep confusion about what freedom really means. Most people think freedom is the ability to do what you want, to choose between options, to have no external restrictions. But Spinoza would say, that's not freedom. That's just following your desires. And your desires are determined by causes you didn't choose, by your genetics, by your upbringing, by the propaganda you've absorbed, by the experiences you've had. You don't choose what you desire. You just discover that you desire. So where is freedom? Freedom is in understanding why you desire what you desire, and then acting not because you're pushed by blind desires, but because you understand what kind of action increases your power to exist. It's the difference between an addict who uses drugs because he's compelled by desire and a doctor who takes medicine because he understands its effects. Both are determined, but one acts by compulsion, the other acts by understanding. And that difference is everything. The addict is a slave, not because there are physical chains, but because he doesn't understand the causes that move him. He is controlled by forces he doesn't comprehend. The doctor is free, not because he can do anything, but because he acts according to understanding. He is the cause of his own actions, not a mere effect of external causes. And the more you understand, the more free you become. Not free to violate the laws of nature, but free to act according to your deepest nature, in harmony with the whole. This distinction between two types of freedom is crucial to understanding how Spinoza remains relevant today, especially when we look at modern neuroscience. In recent decades, neuroscientists have made disturbing discoveries about how our brain works. Benjamin Libet, for example, did experiments that showed our brain makes decisions before we are consciously aware of them. You think you decide to raise your hand, but electrical measurements show your brain already initiated the process half a second before you have the conscious sensation of deciding. So who's really in control? Your conscious self, or unconscious processes in your brain? Spinoza would have said, that's the wrong question. There is no separation between you and your brain. You are your brain. You are your body. You are the total sum of all physical processes happening in this particular configuration of matter. The illusion is thinking there's a you separate who is piloting the body as if it were a machine. There is no pilot. There is only the total process. And when you understand this, something interesting happens. You stop blaming yourself for thoughts that appear. You stop punishing yourself for desires that arise. You understand that all of this is part of a natural process, but at the same time, you don't become passive, because you understand that understanding itself is part of the process. That knowledge changes the system. that understanding your own causes gives you power over them. It's like the difference between being pushed by a wave you don't see coming and surfing a wave you understand. In both cases, you're being moved by water, but in the second case, you're in harmony with the force, not in conflict with it. And there's more. Neuroscience has also discovered something called neuroplasticity. Your brain is not fixed. It constantly changes based on your experiences, your thoughts, your actions. This means you can reprogram yourself, not through magical willpower, but through repeated exposure to new patterns, through practice, through conscious attention. Spinoza would say that's exactly it. You change the causes that determine you through repeated understanding. Each time you understand something new about yourself, you add a new cause to the system, and this new cause influences all future actions. It's determinism, but it's not fatalism, because knowledge is one of the causes that determines the future. Now think about how this applies to modern society. We live in an era of extreme polarization, political, religious, cultural. People hate each other over differences of opinion. Families are destroyed by disagreements about vaccines, elections, identity. Why? Because most people think their beliefs are free choices, and therefore anyone who disagrees chose to be wrong, chose to be evil, chose to be stupid. But Spinoza would say no one chooses their beliefs. You believe what you believe because of thousands of factors you didn't control: where you were born, how you were raised, what books you read, what experiences you had, what algorithms fed you information. You didn't choose any of this, so when someone disagrees with you, it's not because they chose to be wrong, it's because they were determined by different causes than yours. And when you understand this, something changes. You stop hating people for their opinions. You begin to have compassion, not agreement, compassion. You understand that they couldn't believe otherwise, given their causes, just as you can't believe otherwise, given yours. This doesn't mean all opinions are equally valid. Some opinions increase suffering, others increase understanding, and you should act according to your understanding, trying to change the causes that produce destructive beliefs. But you do this without hatred, without moral superiority, with the understanding that you could easily be in their position if you had been exposed to the same causes. This is the basis of Spinozist ethics. It's not based on divine commandments. It's based on understanding that we are all part of the same whole, that suffering in any part affects the whole, that increasing understanding anywhere strengthens everyone, and when you apply this to your own life, everything changes. You stop punishing yourself for failures. You understand they were inevitable given the causes, but you also understand you can change future causes through understanding. You stop envying others. You understand they didn't choose their talents, just as you didn't choose yours, but you can admire them and learn from them, thus changing your own causes. You stop fearing the future. You understand that what comes will be the result of causes, and that you are one of those causes. So you act in the best way possible, but without anxiety about results beyond your control. You stop clinging to the past. You understand the past was necessary, not good, necessary, and that lamenting about it is wasting energy that could be used to influence the future. But perhaps the most profound application of Spinoza's philosophy is in the question of the meaning of life. This is the great question that haunts modernity. If God is dead, as Nietzsche declared, if there is no divine purpose, if we are just evolved apes on an insignificant planet orbiting a common star in an indifferent universe, then what are we doing here? For many people, the death of God led to nihilism. If nothing matters in the grand scheme of things, then why do anything? Why be good? Why strive? Why not just seek immediate pleasure until we die? Spinoza offers a completely different answer, and it's an answer that Hawking lived. The meaning of life doesn't come from some external purpose imposed by a creator. It comes from within. It comes from what you are. You are a temporary expression of infinite substance. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself through this particular configuration of matter. You are literally the cosmos looking at itself. And what is the deepest nature of anything that exists? To persist, to grow, to increase its power to act. This is what Spinoza called conatus, the effort of each thing to continue existing and to become more. A plant grows toward light. An animal seeks food. A person seeks knowledge. All are expressions of the same fundamental impulse. to increase the power to exist. And the highest form of this impulse in conscious beings like us is to increase understanding. Because understanding is power. The more you understand, the more free you become, more joyful, more capable of acting according to your true nature. So the meaning of life is to understand, to know yourself, to know the world, to know your connection with the whole. And this meaning is not arbitrary. It's not something you invent. It's something you discover by understanding your own nature. You don't need God to tell you to seek understanding. You seek naturally, just as you naturally seek to breathe. It's part of what you are. And the beauty of this vision is that it makes every moment meaningful. Not because it's taking you to some final destination, but because each moment is an opportunity to increase understanding, to become more conscious, to express more fully what you are. Hawking understood this perfectly. He didn't waste time wondering if his life had purpose. He simply lived with insatiable curiosity. Each day was an opportunity to understand more about black holes, about time, about the universe. And this search was not a means to an end. It was the end itself. It was the purest expression of who he was. Now, this doesn't mean we should all be theoretical physicists. Spinoza wasn't saying there's only one way to live well. Each person has a unique nature, a unique configuration of causes that makes them who they are. And living well means acting according to your deepest nature, not according to external expectations. For some, this means creating art. For others, it means caring for people. For others, it means exploring ideas. For others, it means building things. There is no hierarchy. There is no better path. There is only the question, are you expressing your true nature, or are you living according to external causes you don't understand? And how do you discover your true nature? Through experimentation, through attention, through noticing what makes you feel most alive, most present, most powerful. Not powerful in the sense of dominating others, powerful in the sense of being more fully yourself, of increasing your power to act according to your understanding. And here's something fascinating. When you do this, when you live according to your deepest nature, you automatically contribute to the good of the whole. Why? Because you are part of the whole. And when any part functions better, the whole benefits. It's like an organ in a body. When the heart pumps blood efficiently, all other organs benefit. Not because the heart is trying to be altruistic, but simply because it's doing well what it is. Similarly, when you express your true nature with understanding, you naturally contribute to increasing the understanding and power of all humanity. You don't need to sacrifice yourself. You don't need to live for others. You just need to be fully yourself, with awareness that you are part of an interconnected whole. And the more you understand this, the more you realize that helping others is not sacrifice. It's expansion of your own being. Because you understand there's no fundamental separation, that their good is your good, that their suffering is your suffering, not by some moral commandment, but by direct understanding of the fundamental unity of everything. This completely changes ethics. It's no longer about following rules. It's about increasing understanding. And the more you understand, the more naturally you act in ways that benefit the whole. But there is one aspect of Spinoza's philosophy that few discuss, and it is perhaps the most radical of all, the idea of the intellectual love of God. When you first hear this, it sounds contradictory. Spinoza spent his entire life arguing against the personal God of religions, and now he's talking about love for God? But what Spinoza means is something completely different from traditional religious love. Intellectual love of God is not worship. It's not reverence for a separate being. It's something much deeper and stranger. It's the state of consciousness that arises when you understand, not just intellectually but viscerally, that you are part of infinite substance. When you see each thing, including yourself, as a necessary expression of the whole. In this state, you feel a union with everything that exists, not because you dissolve and lose your identity, but because you see that your identity has always been part of something greater. It's like the difference between looking at the ocean from outside and diving into it. When you dive, you're still you, but now you're immersed in the water, surrounded by it, part of it. The intellectual love of God is diving into the understanding that you are the universe experiencing itself. And when you reach this state, something extraordinary happens. You become incapable of hating, incapable of envying, incapable of fearing. Why? Because hating another person would be like your left hand hating your right hand. They're both part of the same body. Envying another would be like your foot envying your head. Both are necessary. Both have different functions. Fearing death would be like a wave fearing to return to the ocean. This is not a belief, it's a direct perception that arises from deep understanding. And Spinoza said, this is the highest state of human existence, not because it's morally superior, but because it's the state of greatest understanding, greatest power, greatest joy. Now you might be thinking this is beautiful in theory, but how to reach this state? How to leave the normal experience of separation and enter this consciousness of union? Spinoza was clear there are no shortcuts, no magic techniques, no drugs that take you there permanently. There is only the patient work of increasing understanding. You begin by understanding simple causes. Why you felt anger in that situation. Why you desire that thing. Why you fear that. And gradually, as you understand more and more causes, your perspective begins to change. You begin to see patterns, connections. You begin to realize that everything is interlinked in ways you didn't see before. And eventually, if you persist, there are moments when the illusion of separation falls completely. Moments when you see directly that you are part of the whole. Moments of intellectual love of God. These moments are rare, they're fleeting, but they change you permanently. Because once you've seen, you can't unsee. Once you've felt the union, you can't completely return to the illusion of separation. And even when you return to normal consciousness, something has remained different. You carry that understanding with you, and it influences all your actions. Hawking had such moments. Any scientist who looks deeply into nature has them. Moments when equations are not just symbols on paper. Moments when you feel the elegance, the necessity, the beauty of what exists. Einstein called this cosmic religious feeling. Spinoza called it intellectual love of God. But it's the same experience. And this experience doesn't make you less scientific. It makes you more. Because you see that science is not just a tool to manipulate the world, it's a form of communion with it. Each equation you understand is a door to a deeper understanding of the substance that is everything. Each experiment you do is a conversation with the universe. Each discovery is a revelation of how things necessarily are. And the more you discover, the more you love. Not an emotional love, an intellectual love. The pure pleasure that comes from understanding. This is the deepest meaning of Spinoza's philosophy. And it's why it remains relevant, because ultimately it's not about denying God or affirming God. It's about transforming your relationship with reality. From a relationship of fear and obedience to a relationship of understanding and love. From seeing the universe as a hostile place that needs to be appeased to a place that can be understood and appreciated. From seeing yourself as a separate creature seeking salvation to a temporary expression of the eternal seeking understanding. So we return to the original question. Why did Stephen Hawking say that Spinoza was right about God? Because Hawking understood something fundamental, something that most people still haven't understood. Science didn't kill God. Science matured our understanding of God. The God of traditional religions is a human projection, a cosmic king, a stern father, a judge, an architect. It's God created in our image. But Spinoza's God is the opposite. It's the ultimate reality of which we are a temporary expression. It's not a being. It's being itself. It's not a person. It's the substance of all persons. And this is not less divine. It's more divine. Because it's real. You don't need to have faith in this God. You can investigate it, study it, understand it. Through science, through philosophy, through careful attention to your own experience. And the more you understand, the more you realize the radical depth of this vision. When you look at a star through a telescope, you're not looking at something separate from you. You're looking at atoms that were forged in other stars billions of years ago. Atoms that eventually became you. You are literally made of stardust. When you study evolution, you're not learning about how God created different species. You're learning how infinite substance expresses itself through increasingly complex forms, how the universe develops consciousness of itself through billions of years of trial and error. When you meditate on your own consciousness, you're not exploring something that's inside your head. You're exploring what it's like to be a small part of the universe that has become conscious. All of this is Spinozism, and all of this is confirmed by modern science. But there's a crucial difference between reading about this and living it. You can understand intellectually that you are part of the universe, but still feel separate, still feel alone, still feel insignificant. The transformation happens when you don't just know, but feel. When intellectual understanding becomes visceral experience. And how does this happen? The same way any profound transformation happens. Through sustained attention, through practice, through returning repeatedly to understanding until it becomes your new default way of seeing. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. First you understand intellectually how to do it, but your body doesn't know yet. You fall, you try again, and eventually there's a click moment. Your body understands. And from then on you don't need to think, you just know. The same thing happens with Spinozist understanding. First you understand with the mind, but you don't yet feel it in the body. You still react with fear, anger, envy, and then you return to understanding. You remember that everything is caused, that everyone is part of the same whole, that there's nothing to fear, nothing to hate. And gradually, this understanding descends deeper. It reaches deeper layers of your psyche. And one day you realize you've changed, that things that used to disturb you don't disturb anymore, that you see people with more compassion, that you see the world with more clarity. You haven't become perfect, you still have emotions, you still suffer. But there's a fundamental difference. You're no longer a slave to emotions. You see them arise. You understand their causes, and you choose how to respond based on understanding, not on compulsive reaction. This is freedom in the Spinozist sense, and it's the only kind of freedom that is real. Hawking lived this freedom. Trapped in a body that barely worked, he was freer than most people with perfectly healthy bodies. Why? Because he wasn't trapped by fear, by social expectations, by need for approval. He simply was who he was, and did what he loved, exploring the universe, sharing knowledge, provoking people with his dry humor, living each day as an opportunity to increase understanding. And in the end, when he knew he was dying, he wasn't afraid. Not because he believed in life after death, but because he understood that death is just a transformation, that the atoms that formed Stephen Hawking would return to the universe, that the energy that animated him would change form. He once said, "I have lived with the prospect of an early death for the last 49 years. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm in no hurry to die. There is so much I want to do first." That is total Spinozist acceptance. Not denying death, not desiring death, but also not fearing it, simply continuing to live, exploring, understanding, until the inevitable transformation happens. And when it happened, on March 14, 2018, Stephen Hawking left an extraordinary legacy. Not just scientific discoveries, but an example of how to live with understanding, how to find joy despite extreme limitations, how to maintain curiosity until the last moment. And among all the things he said and wrote, one of the most significant was recognizing Spinoza, recognizing that an excommunicated philosopher from the 17th century had seen something that would take 300 years for science to confirm, that God and nature are the same thing, that there is no fundamental separation between things. That understanding is the path to freedom, that love is not sentimental emotion, but deep understanding of our union with everything that exists. This is the message that crosses centuries, from Spinoza to Hawking, from an excommunicated Jew grinding lenses in a rented room to a brilliant physicist exploring black holes in a wheelchair. Both saw the same truth, both lived according to it, and both left us a gift, the possibility of doing the same. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to understand advanced physics or complex philosophy. You just need to start paying attention, to question your assumptions, to seek understanding instead of comfort. And gradually, step by step, you will discover what Spinoza and Hawking discovered, that you are not a separate creature struggling to survive in a hostile universe. You are the universe itself experiencing itself through this particular and precious configuration of conscious matter. And this understanding changes everything, transforms fear into curiosity, anger into compassion, despair into acceptance, separation into union, not through blind faith, through clear understanding. This is the revolution that Spinoza started, that Hawking continued, and that is available to anyone willing to look honestly at the nature of things. The question now is, are you ready to see? There is a moment in the life of every thinking person when everything you believed begins to crumble, not from trauma, not from tragedy, but from understanding. You realize that the answers they gave you in childhood don't make sense, that the certainties they promised you are built on sand, that the world doesn't work the way they taught you. This moment is frightening, because when the old answers fall, you are temporarily without ground, without direction, without purpose. Spinoza went through this. Hawking went through this. And if you're watching this now, you're probably going through it or have already gone through it. The question is not whether this moment comes. The question is what you do when it comes. Most people panic. They run back to old beliefs, even knowing they're false. Because false certainty seems better than honest uncertainty. Others fall into nihilism. If there's no absolute truth, if there's no divine purpose, then nothing matters. So why not just give up? But there's a third way. Spinoza's way. Hawking's way. Accept uncertainty. Embrace the search. Understand that not having ready answers is not weakness. It's the beginning of true strength. Because when you stop leaning on external authorities, when you stop seeking validation in sacred books or scientific dogmas, something extraordinary happens. You begin to trust your own capacity to understand, not to know everything, but to investigate, to question, to follow evidence wherever it leads. And this trust is not arrogance, it's deep humility, because you recognize that your understanding is limited, that you could be wrong, that there's always more to learn. But at the same time, you recognize that your capacity to reason is real, that your experience is valid, that you have the right and responsibility to think for yourself. This is what Spinoza did when he was excommunicated. He could have submitted, could have pretended to believe, could have kept his ideas to himself, but he chose intellectual integrity, even knowing the price. And what he discovered on the other side of that choice was something unexpected. Not loneliness, not despair, but a profound freedom. The freedom to explore ideas without fear of divine punishment. The freedom to follow logic to its final conclusions, even if those conclusions are disturbing. The freedom to live according to understanding, not according to fear. Hawking made the same choice. When doctors gave him 2 years to live, he was 21 years old. He could have given up, could have surrendered to depression, could have spent his last years lamenting. But he chose differently. He chose to continue thinking, continue exploring, continue living with maximum intensity. And what happened? He didn't die in 2 years. He lived 55 more, half a century beyond what was expected. And in those 55 years, he revolutionized our understanding of the universe. This wasn't a miracle. It wasn't magical willpower. It was simply the manifestation of Spinozist conatus, the fundamental impulse of everything to continue existing and increase its power. Hawking had something to live for, had questions to answer, had mysteries to explore. And this purpose, this deep connection with something greater than himself, gave him a strength that surprised all the doctors. Now you might be thinking, this is inspiring, but what does it mean for me? I'm not a brilliant physicist, I'm not a revolutionary philosopher, I'm just an ordinary person trying to survive in a complicated world. And that's exactly where Spinoza's philosophy becomes most powerful. Because it's not just for geniuses, it's for anyone who suffers, anyone who searches, anyone who wants to understand. You suffer when your desires are not satisfied, when your expectations are frustrated, when things don't happen as you think they should, and every traditional religion tells you, pray more, have faith, be patient, your reward will come in heaven. But Spinoza says something radically different. He says, investigate why you're suffering. What are the causes? What expectations do you have that are in conflict with reality? And when you investigate honestly, you discover something fascinating. Most suffering comes not from circumstances, but from your interpretation of circumstances. You lose a job, that's a fact, but the suffering comes from the story you tell about that fact. You say, this shouldn't have happened, I'm a failure, my life is ruined, but these are interpretations. They're not reality. Reality is, you lost a job. Period. The rest is story you added. And when you see this clearly, when you separate fact from interpretation, something changes. The suffering doesn't completely disappear, but it loses intensity, loses the power to crush you, because you see that it's not the situation that's hurting you. It's your resistance to the situation, your insistence that it should be different. And when you stop resisting, when you accept what is, you recover energy. Energy that was being spent fighting against reality. Energy that can now be used to respond intelligently to the situation. This is not resignation. It's not passivity. It's active acceptance. You accept what is in order to work effectively with what is. It's like martial arts. You don't resist the opponent's force, you redirect it. And to do that, first you need to accept that the force exists. Similarly, to deal effectively with any situation, you first need to accept that it is what it is, not what you'd like it to be, what it is. And this acceptance doesn't come from willpower, it comes from understanding. Understanding that everything that exists is the result of causes. Understanding that wishing the past were different is as useless as wishing gravity didn't exist. Gravity exists. The past happened. Now what are you going to do from here? There's a story about Spinoza that few know, and it reveals something profound about how he lived his philosophy. One day a spider appeared in the room where Spinoza worked. It was building a web in the corner, and Spinoza, instead of killing it or expelling it, simply observed it. He spent hours observing how the spider wove its web, how it moved, how it responded to stimuli, and he was fascinated. His friends thought this was strange. Why would a brilliant philosopher waste time observing a spider? But Spinoza wasn't wasting time. He was seeing infinite substance express itself through a particular form. He was seeing conatus in action, the fundamental impulse to exist and act manifested in a tiny organism, and in that moment of observation, there was no separation between Spinoza and the spider. Both were modes of the same substance. Both expressed the same fundamental force of existence. This might seem mystical, but it's not. It's simply seeing things as they are, seeing that human consciousness and animal instinct are different expressions of the same fundamental process. That there's no cosmic hierarchy, there's only varying complexity. And when you see this, when you really see, something changes in how you relate to everything. You stop seeing other living beings as objects. You see them as expressions of the same force that animates you. You develop a natural respect, not based on moral commandments, but on direct recognition of kinship. Hawking had this same quality. He didn't see himself as special, as separate from the rest of nature. He saw himself as part of a continuum, from subatomic particles to galaxies, all part of the same evolutionary process. And this vision didn't make him feel insignificant. It made him feel connected, part of something infinitely greater and older than any individual life. When he looked at the stars, he wasn't looking at something distant and alien. He was looking at his own ancestral history, at the place where the atoms that composed him were forged. And when he studied black holes, he wasn't studying abstract objects. He was studying the extreme behavior of space-time, the very structure of reality of which he was part. Science, for Hawking, was not conquest of nature. It was dialogue with it. It was nature knowing itself through him. And this is exactly what Spinoza said about knowledge. It's not something you impose from outside. It's something that emerges from within. It's infinite substance becoming conscious of itself through you. When you understand a mathematical equation, it's not you conquering mathematics. It's mathematics revealing itself to you. It's the logical structure of the universe manifesting in your consciousness. When you have a deep insight, it's not you creating something from nothing. It's you seeing something that was always there. It's reality becoming transparent for a moment. And the more you have these experiences, the more you realize that thought is not something you do. It's something that happens through you. You don't choose your thoughts. They arise from causes you don't control, from neural connections, from past experiences, from genetic patterns. But here's the fascinating thing. Although you don't choose your thoughts, you can influence the types of thoughts that arise. How? By changing the causes. If you spend time reading philosophy, philosophical thoughts arise more frequently. If you practice compassion, compassionate thoughts become more automatic. If you cultivate curiosity, curious thoughts appear more naturally. You're not directly controlling thoughts, you're cultivating the garden where they grow. And with time and patience, the garden changes. This is neuroplasticity. But Spinoza already understood the principle 300 years before neuroscientists. He knew you change your mind by changing the causes that influence it. And the most powerful cause of all? Attention. Where you place your attention repeatedly, that grows. If you place attention on fear, you become more fearful. If you place attention on gratitude, you become more grateful. If you place attention on understanding, you become wiser. Not by magic, by simple and direct causality. And this means you have more power than you think. Not magical power to create any reality you imagine, but real power to direct your development, to become more than you are now. Spinoza called this virtue, not in the moralistic sense, but in the sense of power. Virtues mean strength, and virtue for Spinoza is simply increasing your power to exist and act, and the path to this is knowledge. Knowledge of causes, knowledge of patterns, knowledge of yourself as part of an interconnected whole. But there's a danger here, a danger we need to face honestly. If everything is determined, if there's no free will, if we're just natural processes following causal laws, then is there no responsibility? If a criminal commits a crime, can he say, "I didn't choose this. I was determined by my circumstances. I'm not responsible"? If a corrupt politician steals, can he say, "My actions were caused by factors beyond my control. Don't blame me"? Wouldn't this lead to moral chaos? Spinoza had an answer for this, and it's an answer that modern society is slowly beginning to understand. Responsibility doesn't require free will. It requires causality. When we punish a criminal, we're not punishing a free choice. We're adding a new cause to the system. We're showing that certain actions lead to certain consequences, and this information becomes a cause that influences future behavior. Punishment is not cosmic revenge. It's social engineering. It's a way of changing the causes that determine behavior. And when you understand this, everything changes about how we think about justice. You stop wanting to punish because the person deserves to suffer. You punish only when it effectively changes behavior, when it protects society, when it adds useful causes to the system, and you seek to understand the deep causes of crime. Not to excuse, but to prevent. Because if criminality is caused by poverty, inadequate education, trauma, then the most effective way to reduce crime is to change those causes. This is not being soft on crime. It's being intelligent about it. Countries that have adopted this approach, like the Scandinavian countries, have the lowest recidivism rates in the world. Why? Because they treat prisoners not as bad people who deserve to suffer, but as people determined by causes that can be changed. This is applied Spinozism, and it works. Similarly with education. If you understand that children don't choose to be lazy or disinterested, you stop blaming them, and you begin to investigate the causes. What environmental, neurological, social factors are causing the behavior? And when you identify the causes, you can change them, not through punishment, through intelligent modification of the learning environment. Similarly with mental health. If you understand that depression is not character weakness, but the result of biological and environmental causes, you stop judging, and you begin to treat. In all these areas, the Spinozist vision leads to better, more effective, more humane solutions. But there's resistance, because people feel that if there's no free will, then there's no justice, no merit. No one really deserves their achievements or their failures. And in a strict sense, Spinoza would say, yes, exactly. No one deserves in the cosmic sense. Everything is the result of causes. But this doesn't mean we can't have gratitude, doesn't mean we can't celebrate excellence, doesn't mean we can't have aspirations. It just means we do all this without illusion, without arrogance, without judging those who didn't have the same favorable causes. Hawking was extraordinarily talented, but he didn't choose his brain. He didn't choose his curiosity. He didn't choose to be born in an era when his ideas could be explored. All of this was luck, causes he didn't control. But this doesn't diminish his achievements. It just puts them in appropriate context and allows others to see that talent is not moral merit. It's just a particular configuration of causes, and this is liberating. Because it means that if you're not talented at something, you're not morally inferior. You just have different causes, and you can cultivate new causes. Similarly, if you're talented, you're not morally superior. You were just lucky. And you have responsibility to use that talent in ways that benefit the whole, not by moral obligation, but because when you understand you're part of the whole, you naturally want the whole to prosper. It's like taking care of your own body. You don't do it by moral obligation. You do it because you are your body. Pain in any part is your pain. Health in any part is your health. Similarly with society, when you really understand you're part of it, that there's no fundamental separation, you naturally care about the whole, not by sacrifice, but by natural extension of your own well-understood interest. Now let's get to the hardest point, the point most people don't want to face: death. All religions promise something after death. Heaven, reincarnation, paradise, union with God. Something that makes death not so final. And it's understandable why. Death is frightening. The idea of simply ceasing to exist is disturbing. So we create stories that make it more palatable. But Spinoza doesn't offer easy comfort. He offers truth. And the truth, according to Spinoza, is that the individual mind does not survive the death of the body. There is no heaven, no reincarnation. When your body dies, the particular configuration of matter that produces your consciousness dissolves. This sounds depressing, nihilistic, as if nothing mattered if it's going to end. But Spinoza would say, you're looking at it wrong. Yes, your particular form of consciousness is temporary, but the substance of which you're made is eternal. The atoms that compose your body existed before you were born, and will continue existing after you die. The energy that flows through you doesn't disappear. It just changes form. And more importantly, what you do during your life has effects that continue afterward. The ideas you share, the people you influence, the things you create. All of this continues reverberating through the causal chain. Spinoza died in 1677, but his ideas are alive now, more alive than ever, influencing millions of people who have never heard his name, shaping modern philosophy, science, ethics. Hawking died in 2018, but his discoveries continue. His books continue to be read. His influence continues shaping how we think about the universe. They have no consciousness of this now, but the substance expresses itself through what they created, and you have the same potential, not to become immortal, but to contribute to the causal chain in ways that continue after you. Each kind word you say can change someone's day, which changes how that person treats others, which changes the lives of dozens of people you'll never meet. Each insight you share can plant a seed that grows in someone's mind, that flourishes in ways you can't predict. Each action based on understanding adds a new cause to the system, and causes propagate, forward, forever. So you don't need to be famous, don't need to leave a grand legacy. You just need to live with integrity, with attention, with understanding. And automatically, inevitably, you affect the whole. For the better, because actions based on understanding always increase order, always increase the collective power to exist. This is immortality in the only sense that matters, not preservation of your individual consciousness, but continuation of your influence through the infinite causal chain. And when you understand this, fear of death diminishes. It doesn't completely disappear. You still have the biological instinct to survive, but existential fear, the terror of ceasing to be, that diminishes, because you see that you were never really separate. You've always been part of a flow, and when your individual form dissolves, you don't go to nothingness. You return to the whole of which you've always been part. It's like a wave in the ocean. The wave arises, exists for a time, has its unique form, but eventually, inevitably, it returns to the ocean. The wave doesn't die. It transforms. The water that composed it doesn't disappear. It just stops having that particular form. And if the wave were conscious, if it understood it had always been ocean, it wouldn't fear returning. It would see this as natural completion of its cycle. Hawking understood this. When asked if he feared death, he said, "I have lived my life with the prospect of an early death for 49 years. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm in no hurry to die. There is so much I want to do first." See the wisdom in this. He didn't deny death, didn't pretend he would live forever. But he also wasn't obsessed with it. He simply lived, doing what he loved, until he couldn't anymore. This is total acceptance. And paradoxically, this acceptance of mortality makes life more precious, not less. If you had all the time in the world, nothing would be urgent. You'd postpone everything. But when you understand your time is limited, each moment becomes precious, not in an anxious way, in an appreciative way. You savor more, you pay more attention, you live with more intensity. So where does all this leave us? After exploring Spinoza through Hawking's eyes, after seeing how a 17th century philosophy connects with 21st century science, what do we do with this? The answer is, you live differently, not dramatically differently, You don't need to abandon your life, don't need to become a monk, don't need to isolate yourself in a cave. You just begin to pay attention differently. When a strong emotion arises, you stop for a moment. You ask, where does this come from? What causes produce this? What belief is being challenged? What expectation is being frustrated? And in that pause, in that moment of investigation, something changes. The emotion loses a bit of its power. You gain a bit of space. And in that space you can choose how to respond, not choose freely in the magical sense, but choose based on understanding instead of reacting based on compulsion. Over time, this practice becomes natural. You become less reactive, more reflective, more conscious. And as this happens, other changes arise naturally. You become less judgmental, because you understand that people are products of their causes. This doesn't mean you tolerate everything, but it means you respond to destructive behaviors with understanding, not with moralistic anger. You become less anxious about the future, because you understand the future will be the result of causes, and that you are one of those causes. So you do your part and let the rest unfold. You become less attached to the past, because you understand the past was necessary, not good, necessary, and that lamenting about it is waste of energy. You become more curious, because everything becomes interesting when you see it as expression of infinite substance. An ant carrying a leaf, a star exploding, a thought arising in your mind. Everything is the universe doing what it does. And above all, you become more free. Free from the need for external approval. Free from fear of divine judgment. Free from the illusion that you need to be different from what you are. You simply are, and seek to understand, and act based on that understanding. And that's enough. This is what Spinoza taught. This is what Hawking lived. And this is what's available to you now, not as belief, not as faith, but as investigation, as experiment, as practice. You don't need to accept anything I've said. In fact, you shouldn't. You should investigate for yourself. Test in your own experience. See if it makes sense when applied to your life. Because ultimately, truth is not something you accept from authorities. It's something you discover through careful attention to reality. And reality is always available, always showing itself, always offering opportunities for deeper understanding. You just need to look, really look, without presuppositions, without defenses, without needing it to be a particular way. And when you look like this, you see extraordinary things. You see that the universe is not dead, it's alive in every part. You see that consciousness is not an accident. It's a fundamental feature of what exists. You see that you're not a stranger in an alien cosmos. You are the cosmos knowing itself. And this vision doesn't come from faith. It comes from direct observation, from sustained attention, from willingness to see things as they are, not as you'd like them to be. Spinoza did this. Hawking did this. And both discovered something that completely changed their lives. They discovered that truth, even when it destroys your comfortable beliefs, is more satisfying than any comforting lie. They discovered that accepting your condition, whatever it is more powerful than fighting against it. They discovered that understanding is the greatest joy available to a human being. And they lived these discoveries. Not perfectly. They were still human with all human limitations. But they lived with an integrity, a clarity, a presence that impresses anyone who studies their lives. And the invitation now is for you, not to believe what they said, but to investigate what they investigated, to look where they looked, to see if you see what they saw. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll see something completely different, and that's all right. Because the search itself is valuable, the investigation itself is transformative. You don't need to reach final conclusions. You just need to keep the investigation alive. Keep curiosity burning. Keep yourself open to the possibility that there's always more to understand. And if you do this, if you really do this, your life changes. Not because you adopted a new philosophy, but because you began to pay attention. And attention is everything. There's one last thing that needs to be said. Something that connects everything we've explored. Why does this story matter now? Why are Spinoza and Hawking relevant in 2025? Because we live in a moment of crisis of meaning. Traditional religions no longer satisfy many people, but scientific materialism doesn't either. There's a void, a hunger for something deeper. And for many, this void is filled with distractions, infinite entertainment, endless consumption, desperate search for validation on social media, anything not to feel the void. but the void continues. Because these things don't touch what's really missing. What's missing is connection, not with other people only, but with something greater, with the whole, with the deep reality of what exists. And Spinoza offers a path to that connection, not through ritual, not through belief, but through understanding. When you deeply understand that you are part of an infinite totality, the void disappears, not because you fill it with something external, but because you realize the void was an illusion. You were never separate. You just thought you were. And this realization is not an abstract thought. It's a visceral experience that changes everything. You stop seeking external validation because you understand you're already part of the whole. You don't need to prove your worth. You have worth simply by existing, by being a unique expression of the infinite. You stop fearing judgment because you understand there's no cosmic judge. There are only causes and effects, and you can work with those causes intelligently. You stop feeling alone because you understand that loneliness is impossible. You're always in relation, with the air you breathe, with the food you eat, with the atoms that compose you, with the gravity that keeps you on Earth. You're always immersed in an infinite network of connections. And when you feel this, when you really feel it, life changes flavor. It becomes richer, more interesting, more meaningful. Not because you imposed an external meaning, but because you discovered the inherent meaning, the meaning that comes from being a conscious part of a self-aware universe. Hawking lived this, even trapped in a body that barely worked, even unable to perform the simplest physical actions. He lived with more fullness than most people with perfectly functional bodies. Why? Because he wasn't trapped by his situation. He was free in his understanding. He could travel mentally to the beginning of time, could explore the interior of black holes, could imagine alternative universes, could touch the limits of the possible with the fingertips of his mind. And this mental freedom was not escapism. It was the purest expression of who he was. It was his way of participating in the cosmic process of self-knowledge. Spinoza would have understood perfectly. He also lived a physically limited life, excommunicated, poor, sick, but mentally he was freer than kings. He explored territory no one had explored before. He saw connections no one had seen. He built systems of thought as elegant as any cathedral, and this mental activity was not abstract or meaningless. It was the highest form of participation in reality. It was infinite substance knowing itself through him, and this is what's available to you, not just intellectually, but experimentally. You can begin today, now, in this moment. Stop, breathe, feel your body, feel the air entering and leaving. Feel the weight of gravity, feel life pulsing through you, and ask, what is this? What is this experience of being alive? Where does it come from? Where does it go? Don't seek ready answers, just investigate, with genuine curiosity, with total openness. And as you investigate, you'll discover things, not final truths, but insights, partial understandings, glimpses of something greater. And each insight changes you a little, makes you a little more free, a little more conscious, a little more alive. And with enough time, these small changes accumulate, and you realize you've become someone different, not because you forced change, but because you allowed understanding to transform you naturally. This is the path that Spinoza pointed to, that Hawking confirmed, and that is open to anyone willing to walk it. It's not an easy path. It requires brutal honesty. It requires giving up comforts you cling to. It requires facing truths you'd prefer to avoid. But it's a real path, with a real destination, leading to real transformation. And in the end, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that what you were seeking all along wasn't somewhere distant, wasn't in the future, wasn't in an imaginary heaven. It was always here, always now, always available. You just needed to stop seeking and start seeing that you already are what you were looking for, already are part of the infinite, already are expression of the divine. Not in the sense that you're special, in the sense that everything is special, everything is sacred, everything is a necessary and precious expression of the one substance, you, the person sitting next to you, the dog on the street, the tree in the park, the star in the sky. Everything is God expressing itself. Everything is infinite substance taking temporary form. And when you see this, when you really see, there are no more questions about meaning, no more void, No more feeling that something is missing. Because everything is here, everything has always been, you just needed eyes to see. And this vision, this deep understanding, is what Spinoza called the intellectual love of God. It's what Hawking experienced when unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos. It's what's available to you now, not through faith, through understanding, not through belief, through direct vision, not through ritual, through attention. This is the gift that Spinoza left us. This is the legacy that Hawking honored, and this is the invitation that now remains with you. What will you do with it? How will you live in the light of this understanding? There's no right answer. There's no single path. There's only your life, your journey, your particular way of expressing the infinite. Live it well, live it consciously, live it with understanding, and in the process, you'll become part of the lineage, from Spinoza to Hawking to you, of seekers who refused comfortable lies and chose hard truth, of explorers who didn't settle for inherited maps, but insisted on seeing for themselves. This lineage continues, through you, if you choose, and if you choose, know that you're not alone. Thousands of people throughout centuries have made the same choice, walked the same path, discovered the same truths, and now it's your turn. Welcome to the journey.